A council officer was shot dead in a shooting incident in County Durham this morning. Two other men were also shot and wounded.
In 1991, a man had an angry outburst in the United Kingdom. Holding an old weapon, he decided to put an end to the councillor of his town, and he was also willing to attack anybody who got in his way. All for an unbelievable reason. He started lashing out at everybody during a live television broadcast, as millions of viewers at home watched the gruesome scene in shock.
You might not be around to see the outcome of this disaster. Now, you've been warned. If you had any sense, you would go away now.
A shot rang out at the chief planner, fell to the ground, and I've clearly been shot here in the arm.
How did this attack happen? Who was this man and what were his motives? This is the story in the last moments of an incident caused by someone who decided to act outside the law, spreading chaos for a few intense hours, driven by pure desperation. Everything happened on June 20th, 1991, around 9 in the morning, in Buttsfield, Durham County, England. A man named Harry Collinson, 46 years old, who at the time was a local councillor, arrived at the home of Albert Dryden, 51 years old, with a demolition order for his house. And Dryden, in a desperate act of resistance, decided to take action which brought deadly consequences.
What sort of resistance have you put up this morning?
Well, nothing really, just I've been simply all right. Well, I haven't took any other measures, As I say, this is private property, and there's two gates on here.
Everything was being recorded by the local news BBC Look North, which was closely following the story of the conflict, and that day, they wanted to witness how the dispute would end. The cameras showed Dryden completely reluctant to let them enter his home by placing doors and fences that prevented their entry. Everybody on the scene was watchful, but nobody deemed Dryden a real threat, so they were determined to comply with the demolition order.
We'll go through the fence if you don't open the gate. Now, we'll obviously have to take the fence down with the machine. So, if you want, you can have some time to remove the fence yourself to minimise the damage. Do you want to do that?
I'm asking you one more time. Let this appeal go through, and I'm asking you to wait 5 weeks.
According to Albert, he had a letter from the pre-demolition inspection, which supposedly indicated that no eviction action could be taken until his appeal was reviewed. But the truth is that the letter did not contain any information that prevented the demolition, as his appeal had already been rejected. Collinson explained this situation to him, but due to the man's hostile attitude, he decided to give him one last chance.
If you're obstructive in trying to do this, you appreciate that any damage that's subsequently caused as a result of you preventing us doing that will be your liability.
Well, you might not be around to see the outcome of this disaster. Now, you've been warned.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I'm not going to explain, but if you had any sense, you would go away now.
Despite this attitude, he was told he had time to retrieve his belongings from the building, so Dryden went to his caravan, but instead of packing, he went to retrieve his tool for revenge, a Webley Mk6 from World War I. He returned to the fence and aimed at Collinson. The dramatic moment was captured in camera as the man defiantly pointed his weapon at Collinson, who was already wearing his white helmet, ready to begin the demolition work. The councillor asked the cameraman to focus on the threatening man, which resulted in the whole macabre scene being caught on camera. Dryden stood firm, without a shred of doubt on his face. He quickly looked around, and after a few seconds, he pulled the trigger, pointing at his enemy.
Oh, God!
Onlookers screamed in horror as everyone started running away. Dryden jumped over the fence, walking towards Collinson to keep hurting him, while everybody else fled from the wrathful man.
We were standing watching what was going on. The chief planner was trying to persuade the chap to move out the way and let the digger go in. And then a shot rang out at the chief planner, fell to the ground, and I felt a shot in the arm, and I've clearly been shot here in the arm. I'm now hopefully going to get some medical treatment. The policeman was also shot in the buttock here, and the councillor was shot in the chest.
The whole world watched the furious attack carried out by Dryden on air. But why did the man resort to this desperate measure? Why did they want to knock down his home? The details of who this angry man was and the background behind the construction of his house made this crime all the more complicated, which led to a trial that had a very divisive impact in that small English town. Albert Dryden was born on May 12, 1940. He was a former worker at a steel foundry in Consett, and when he was fired in 1982, he decided to use the money to rent a plot of land in Buttsfield, which he eventually bought in 1984. Here, he decided to build a home to live his old age in peace, although initially, Albert lied saying it was a new summer house for his 82-year-old mother. But the truth is that he was building a home for himself, while bypassing all the regulatory frameworks. What he was building was a bungalow, some kind of cabin that is generally intended for tourism, as it is a simple single-story construction with basic amenities. Apparently, he decided to do this because of a man who evaded all planning laws by building a house completely underground. This might have inspired Dryden to act illegally.
This is only half the project. The other half is a nuclear fallout shelter to go on the back.
And you say you don't require planning permission because it is so low in the ground?
So low on the ground. Yeah. And I've yet to see the documents to state that you have to have planning permission. I've asked several times.
He hired an excavator and removed over 2,000 tons of soil. He dug a large hole in the middle of the plot where he began to build some kind of dilapidated-looking house that was partially sinking into the ground. Inside the property he decided to call Maryland Close, near the town of Consett. He also managed to build 2 greenhouses, a shed, a place to park his caravan, part of the house, and a large arched entryway. But all of his progress had to be dismantled, since everything he was doing was not in accordance with legal frameworks of the building code back then. The conflict began because Dryden, who thought that by being in a hole he didn't need planning permission, continued building without a permit for 3 years, thinking that nothing would happen if he didn't submit an application. But in 1989, the council would start receiving the first complaints about irregularities of his construction. Once an investigation was conducted, Dryden's every appeal against the council's decision was rejected, and he even accused them of his mother's passing as a result of his alleged persecution by the council. But that wasn't quite the case, since the county had always been willing to talk things through to find a solution to Dryden's situation, giving him many options to keep some of his constructions untouched. But Dryden stubbornly refused to give up. The last choice they gave him was to modify the building and use it for cattle farming, but the man rejected it. That is why, in accordance with legal documents, the investigation concluded that Albert wasn't allowed to skip any steps in land regularization, and his appeal was rejected. Therefore, the council informed Dryden that he was required to demolish his construction. Seeing that this stubborn man deliberately ignored every warning, authorities had no choice but to come to the place with heavy machinery to carry out the demolition and crush all of Albert's dreams.
Stupidity to go in there.
They say they're going to ask you if they can demolish the bungalow.
Well, the answer is no.
Albert, in anger, had already made all kinds of threats, but they had only been harmless words, until that fateful morning when he decided to make his threats come true, and he would take it out on the man who was assigned to enforce the law, Harry Collinson. Eventually, Albert was judged in a controversial trial that shedded light on the defendant's record, which indicated that apparently this was not an act of revenge, and that the man was hiding more than just anger towards the English bureaucracy. Albert was arrested at the same place of the incident minutes after his attack, once police arrived at the controversial land. He was brought to justice at the Newcastle Crown Court in April 1992. There, the man claimed to suffer from a mental illness and that he was not responsible for his actions, an assertion that was rejected by the jury, that had the opportunity to carefully watch everything that happened in the recordings. There was no doubt that it was a cold-blooded crime. But despite the evidence, part of the community supported Dryden and demanded his freedom, considering that the man only wanted to live in peace in the countryside, and that he was a martyr of the bureaucratic system. They also appealed, bringing up the pressure from the council and the presence of television, which led the man to defend his property with inevitable aggression. But the truth is that Albert was willing to resist and take his stubbornness to the very end. And unfortunately, he took the life of an innocent person who fell victim to his stubborn attitude. For Collinson's family and part of the council and law enforcement units, the situation was clear, and they told their side of the story, which differed from the controversial man's neighbors, as he was apparently known for carrying a large number of weapons, explosives, and he had also previously engaged in violent acts. Since he was 17 years old, he had a firearms license. He bought the first one and thus began his greatest collection. But not all of them were legally registered, which made his possession illegal. And he never hid the fact that he was the bearer of multiple tools of destruction.
Are you prepared to knock it down?
No. I might blow it down, dynamite it, or blow it up. I'll blow it up, but the council won't have any hand in it. I'll do it myself, and there'll be a full coverage.
Apparently, Dryden was a dangerous man who never took anything seriously until his actions brought consequences. Albert was found guilty of taking Collinson's life and sentenced to life in prison, but was released in October 2017 after 25 years in prison due to a stroke that left him in a delicate state. He passed away in 2018 at the age of 77 in a nursing home, just 1 year after being released. According to Collinson's brother, after letters written in prison were made public, Albert never showed remorse for his actions, and throughout his time in prison, he continued to blame others for what had happened, clinging to the hope that he would be granted parole one day. The story of Albert Dryden reminds us of the importance of resolving conflicts in a peaceful manner and through legal actions. Although the never-ending bureaucracy might make us feel frustration, we must not become criminals to sort things out. The tragic act of violence against Harry Collinson left everlasting scars on his community and on Albert's own life, as he was deprived of his home and freedom. This grim episode teaches us that dialogue, mediation, and respect for the law are much more effective ways to address disagreements and differences. Violence will never be the solution, and it only perpetuates suffering. It is a wake-up call about the need to seek constructive and peaceful solutions to our problems, even in moments of great frustration.